All right, slide, then I can wrap it up quickly. Uh, Let me just take a quick pause. Are we guys okay? You guys can hear me? I'll have some.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Thank you. All right. Uh, I hope I'm not going overboard on time, right? I think I'm still okay. Um,
Yes, sir.
so this is okay. Excellent. So let me just start this one, right? This is data science. Now, so we spoke about artificial intelligence, if you remember that box, and then there was data science part, right? So this is where I love this statement. Data is the new oil, right? For decades and decades, Gulf countries, Iran, a lot of other countries, including US for that matter, right? They ran on the oil exports. Today, data is that new oil, right? That's the currency. If you ever follow news, just 2 days back, I think Sundar Pichai, Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, as well as Jeff Bezos, right? So they're the CEOs of these companies, right? These are it's GAFA, right? The group, the big four of technology is what they call it, and they all were summoned up for data privacy issues and stuff, right? Not getting into that detail, that's a separate topic to be discussed for some other day. But uh, how do they run? What do they do? It's all data, and it's all data science, right? I was reading this article, just wanted to share with you guys. There are several books available as well, but check this one out. It says, data scientist, the sexiest job in the 21st century, by Davenport and Bartle. I mean, if you get a time, some time, pretty good article. So with this now, so we talked about big data, right? The big data that exists everywhere now. The data effectiveness, which is the data quality, in terms of there is so much of data. The issue is how to get to the right data, how to cleanse it, how to extract the right ones, how to uh, uh, use them properly, right? And then of course the data analytics, we already spoke about this, so I'll move on to the next bullet, which is the predictive analytics. So this is again prediction. Again, from my personal experience, I can tell you, I had published, along with my PhD advisor, we did a lot of work on this prediction, of solubility, for example, and using the regression analysis and stuff, we came up with that this model where if you simply look at the structure of a molecule, right? In terms of carbons, hydrogen, nitrogens, whatnot. And when you look at the structure of the molecules based on that, using the aqueous solubility coefficients, etc., just looking at the structure and running an equation, and if you know the melting point of that compound, you can predict the solubility with, of course, some percentage of error, right? So that's pretty much we use this SAS, and in statistics I spoke about all that, so not going to repeat myself, but this is exactly the application that you do in other fields as well. Data operations and governance, that this is a big question, right? So who manages the data? It's a human genius problem now. If I was to, or for that matter, you get talking about in vitro fertilization as well, right? I mean, there are a lot of ethical questions, right? Who owns the data? If Google has it, if I know, for example, there are companies like Ethicon, there is company like Verb Surgical, there are a lot of other companies which are which when you partner with, they have this data. Now, when you partner, you share your data with them, obviously, but then they have this whole core data, which now they can pretty much apply at any other places, whether it's McKinsey, whether it's whoever, right? So this is a system, but now it's getting a bit serious, because now you're talking about your own existence, right? Your internal software, and this is something which could be troublesome, right? You don't want to for anyone to know that you have this and this disease, or a hereditary disease, sickle cell anemia, or something like that, right? So it depends, right? To what extent the data could be exchanged. Data privacy is an issue. Data sharing, I think this is a lot of consortiums are being held, a lot of conferences being in terms of if they can really pool all this data, what benefits do we have, right? There is open sourcing, there is Hadoop. If you haven't heard, it's again based on a cloud system, so you can put everything in there and then have it open source and open for others to see it. Data partnerships is another one which is pretty big now. A lot of companies are involved over here as well. um, Ethics, regulations, and blockchain. I think this is ethics and regulations is something which I think we can talk about at in depth. But at the same time, it's data, right? So where do the ethics begin? Where does the morality ends? It's something that still needs a much broader discussion. Blockchain is something I included over here because it's an algorithm, and as I was mentioning earlier about the bitcoins, but this is something that can be adopted. It's something where you have different algorithms of blocks, right? And you keep on adding the blocks. So the previous ones cannot be deleted, cannot be altered. That's the beauty of it, which means that anytime you forward it, or it's almost used as a currency, for example, or in supply chain, for example, it puts a stamp on the ownership. You can track it, you can monitor it, and it cannot be altered. And this is much different than compared to the money part, where or for that matter any other algorithms um, that could be used, really, right? So I was thinking of getting into more detail, but I think I'll stop myself over here. So this is the last slide. Final thoughts. We started from I guess the the energy life, the 70 billion years ago, 3 billion years ago, so on and so forth, and reached the artificial intelligence market competition. We covered a lot of pharmaceutical applications. We spoke about data science in detail. A lot of different fields, that in your career, don't just be focused on one thing. There is so much to explore. Just have fun with it. uh, Final thoughts: all models are wrong, some are useful, right? So this is where it's really up to humans to judge and use and guide the algorithms and artificial intelligence, for that matter, and see what we need. Algorithms do not have morality or ethics, right? Humans do, and that's where we need to be in control. By the time we reach that singularity point that I was talking about, the intelligence explosion, we need to come up with certain restrictions and boundaries around this, and use technology as an enabler to address an unmet need, not the other way around, right? So again, I'm always open for discussion, and any topics that you might have, career related or professionally, feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and we can have more chat. Yeah. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, do you have time? So we have two questions. So are you willing to answer them now, or we'll get them cleared later by mail?
Yeah, let's let's I'm already late for my meeting, so that's fine. Let's take, but let's limit it to two questions, and then we
Yeah,
can,
two
if there is
questions.
anything else, we can certainly come back. Yeah.
Okay, two questions only. Okay, one question
Excellent.
is,
Yep. Yeah,
can
yeah,
we
go ahead.
use can we use deep learning image recognition techniques for any crystal structure, crystal habits, or can we predict absolute bioavailability?
Can we predict absolute bioavailability? Well, see, everything that happens that you do is based on hold on one second. Baby, you need something? All right, hold on. Sorry, it's my daughter over here. Just hold on. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Sorry, that's my daughter. So yeah, so on bioavailability, she's just so she's telling me that I would not be able to go to the swimming pool today. So that's what she came to tell me. But anyways, the question was around, can it predict bioavailability? Uh, yes. So to a certain extent, yes, along with the error that we got to recognize, right? It can't be 100%. Nothing can replace the in vivo experiments, right? But at the same time, can it be predictive? Absolutely, right? You're, as I was saying, when you discuss, when I was talking about the QSAR techniques, and when you're talking about the structural components, these properties are the physical properties are additive, right? So that's where the softwares might be able to predict, uh, but with certain range, right? And then the previous one was, what was the question on the imaging again? Sorry.
Yeah. Can we use deep learning image recognition techniques for any
Can you just
crystal
repeat the first
structure?
part of the question?
Yeah. Can we use deep learning image recognition techniques for any crystal structure or crystal habits?
For crystal structure or crystal habits, so now you're getting into the cubes and all that. I mean, again, it's really not imaging, but maybe, yeah, you can call it imaging as well, because I was thinking more on the radiological side. But on the crystal habit structures, certainly it is something where you can if you have used these softwares. I have used these softwares, and I can tell you that you can really play around with the moieties, you can play around with the elements, you can play around creating weight structures, and you can figure out to the extent where not only that you can predict the structure, but then you can also predict what kind of crystal habits, as you said, would it form in. And then that could extrapolate the knowledge, because, for example, if you have powders, then you can get into the solid state, I mean, right? Then you can start predicting the melting points, you can start predicting the other physical parameters, chemical parameters as well. And then because of that, then you can start predicting the partition coefficients that could get into the bioavailability. It can also tell you on the powder characteristics, right, the flow, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of information that you can actually use it. Again, this goes back to the point that how far do we want to go with this, right? There is so much of data available. You got to realize one thing, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So all these systems, when you talk about data science, it is based on the data that is fed in, right? If the data that you feed in is not good, right, I mean, it would not really make any sense. So again, just to give maybe a quick example, right? We need humans, we need our brains, because correlation could be in anything, right? I mean, let's say the sales of cars is growing, right? Auto industry is growing, and you also feed a data to the system saying that, hey, you know what, the number of stars that are discovered are also growing. Now the system will look at both. It will plot a curve, right? If y-axis, x-axis, and it will plot, and it might give you a correlation of let's say r square of 0.9 or something, right? And this would tell you, I mean, the system is saying that, hey, you know what, as the cars are growing, and the car sales are growing as well. But that doesn't mean anything, right? Obviously it's wrong. So the point is that it's really up to us to feed in what kind of data we are feeding in, and then how to extrapolate it and to use it to what extent. I know I maybe spoke a bit detailed, but the answer to your question is yes, you can.
Okay. So one last question. Uh, can we use neural networking for predicting entrapment efficiency of nanoparticles? If yes, what are the do's and don'ts for building the model to get better accuracy?
So the molecular, I'm sorry, the entrapment efficiency. So when you're talking about deep learning, you are talking about neural networks. And to answer the question, I don't think so. I don't think so. This is my personal opinion. I had not worked in those, but I mean, there might be some possibility. If you are reading it out from Google or something, might be someone who might be trying it out. Someone can try it out, I don't know. But my opinion on that is that when you talk about entrapment efficiency, you're talking about a lot of factors, right? You're talking about what's the polymer that's in there, what's the drug substance in there, what's the pore size, what's the what do you call the thickness of this lipid structure, so on and so forth. So in order to determine to use networks, I think that would be overkilling it, in my opinion. That's something where it's teaching itself. So again, if you keep on feeding some data to it, along with right parameters, along with right equations, and along with the right commands, right? I mean, various languages, Python and this and that. I mean, if you really use it properly, there might be a day when you can do it. It's really based on the data that you put in, right? So currently, if you think about it, if you it's prediction that you're talking about, right? And prediction is based on the past events. It's based on past events, and do you have enough data to talk about entrapment efficiency from the past, right? And how many variables are you talking about, right? So and so it might give you something. I'm sure it'll spit out something, but whether would it be accurate or not, that's something that needs to be seen.
Okay.
I hope it answers your question, and if not, then we can connect later and we can certainly discuss. You can just call me later on sometime and we can talk about it as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for being with us, for having us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Let me just stop sharing my screen. All right. So I think we are good then. Can I take your leave? Thank you
Yeah.
again. And feel free to, connect anytime. All right. Thank you,
Okay.
guys. Have a good one. Bye.
So, participants, we are having with us our next eminent speaker, Dr. Siddharth Mukherjee, Senior Publication Manager, Boehringer Ingelheim, Germany, who would be leading the session on the topic publications in clinical research. He has rich experience in safety and efficacy areas of pharmaceutical research, scientific communications, publication planning and management. He is well versed with international publication guidelines and document management tools. He has vast experience in professional reviewing and editing of international journals. He holds M.Pharmacy and PhD degrees. In addition, he has worked with several reputed organizations like FV Enclave, Trilogy Writing and Consulting, Frankfurt, Germany, TRM Oncology, the Netherlands, and Novartis, India. So, good evening, sir.
Good
You can
evening.
you can have your technical session ahead. You can move on with
Okay,
your technical session.
thank you so much. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yeah. Clearly.
And I'm not so sure if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? I stopped sharing my screen for a moment because it was not
Okay.
showing the right screen. But can you see something? Okay,
We can see
let
you
me do
only.
it. Okay. Do the entire screen, and let me see if I can do screen 2. And I can share the screen. And okay. You click here to the video call, and when you're ready to stop presenting. Okay, so what do you see my presentation on screen?
No.
The presentation is not coming, but screen is coming. Showing. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We can see.
Uh-huh.
We can
So
see.
can you see the presentation on full
Yeah.
screen mode?
Yeah.
Yes.
On full screen, no, not
Yeah.
not with the notes section, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So hello everyone, I'm Siddharth, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me on this online workshop. Special thanks to my friend, Dr. Jitendra Madan, for connecting with me and giving me this opportunity to present on this workshop. And thank you to all the participants for really waiting till the last session. Okay. So the whole purpose of creating a presentation on publications in clinical research is to give you an idea about a career option in this field in the pharmaceutical industry. And along with it, also telling you what this means to me, what this implies for the pharmaceutical industry, and how you could ever find it helpful. So I know you have all heard about different types of research activities done, and Parijat has beautifully explained how the drug development process traditionally occurs and the new transition into the AI approach to drug discovery to some extent. And I would like to capitalize on that and say that, yes, of course, this is the way the industry is going. And it's very important that you know what's the value of publications in the pharmaceutical industry. As far as publications are concerned in the institute level, you have fantastic advisors at your next to you, with you all the time, to give you an idea about how to do the publications. However, I thought that it might be helpful for you to know how it is from a clinical research perspective in the pharmaceutical industry. So moving on to the obvious slide, like Parijat did, we do have to present a disclaimer that this information that is presented here, it reflects my own personal knowledge and opinion, and it does not represent the position of my current or even past employers. Thank you again for being here. I'll take a quick pause just to ask if, are you able to hear me well, see my slides in full screen?
Yes, sir. We are able to see your slides and hear you also.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the first thing that I would like to begin the presentation by is trying to help you understand, why does the industry do publications? What does it mean for the industry to do the publications? And then for subsequently, I will take you through how it does it and what it means for me and for the industry. So let's begin with, what does the industry, what does the industry do, why does the industry do the publications? So I was thinking of doing a little poll out here if possible, but if, is it possible to do a quick poll, colleagues at NIPER?
Why does the
Is it possible?
yes, sir, of
So
course.
it's all right if it's not possible, but just wanted to ask you.
He's asking me.
Oh, okay.
Option.
What's it?
Yeah.
He is asking to someone. Which one?
This, why does the industry do pubs?
So we have three
You mean,
options.
yeah, Dr. Siddharth, you mean you asked to participate?
Yes, if
Yeah, yeah.
possible, if
Yes, sure, sure.
participants can.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure, sure. We will drop a message on this from our side. Okay.
Yeah. Is it possible from your side?
Yes, regulation guideline, goodwill, transparency, sales, all or none of the
Above.
all. Definitely, it's all.
Okay, that's nice to hear, and I hope some of the audience also agree with the same thought. And you are correct. It is all of the above. However, none of them individually are responsible for the industry to drive them to do publications. So, yeah, thank you so much. So yes, all of the above, and I will take you through some of the regulations or some of the key guidelines that are important for the industry to do pubs. It's also these guidelines which kind of make it the way we work today. So let's look at these guidelines. So preliminarily, it's the PHARMA or the EFPIA. We call them Pharma and FPI for short. These guidelines basically are set up by two regions, the American region and the European regions. And the industries, the pharma industries in these individual regions, they came up with developing these guidelines where they're encouraging all the pharma industries in the respective regions to share all the results of the clinical trials. I just put a snapshot of what you see, the principles for responsible clinical trial data sharing. That's the title of the guideline. And it tells us that all company-sponsored clinical trials should be considered for publication in the scientific literature. And at a minimum, phase 3 clinical trials, and any clinical trial results of significant medical importance should be submitted for publication. So this is just a snippet. It's around 3 pages long, and it gives you a lot of details about why they're encouraging you to do clinical trial data sharing. An extension of this guideline came sometime in 2010, and it got updated in 2013. And in 2014, we got this particular um, re requirement from the European Medicines Agency requesting all sponsors or pharma companies to basically report the clinical trial results in the EudraCity website, which is nothing but the European Clinical Trials Database. Now, though this is not really a publication, but it's this encouragement or the drive to post your results, to make the results more, to publish the results, to make it more available to both physicians, nurses, different types of medical colleagues, as at the same time available to patients and patient caregivers, which is why these guidelines made a very big impact. So how do we really write these? Is there any kind of guidance? Is there any uniformity that we are looking at when we publish this scientific data? And the answer is again, yes, we are. There have been guidelines, and you would be surprised that these guidelines started coming up way before 2010 when the industries got together to put the FPA and the pharma guidance. So you would notice that sometime way back in 1980s and 1988, the ICMJE introduced the authorship criteria. Now, these are smaller organizations or smaller bodies who came together to say, how do we define and how do we write publications? Can there be uniformity in the way the publications which come out of clinical research are written? The ICMJ is the International Committee for Medical Journal Editors. So you can see the initiation came from the journals and the journal editors who actually gave guidance on what should be how to standardize the writing of the publications. They spoke about different ethical considerations like authorship, the contributions of the different authors. How do you define a contribution? What is a substantial contribution? What are the conflicts of interest? What if there is somebody who has some financial interest? Can we declare that? Can we consider them to be an author? So such considerations came into being, and therefore they started laying out these guidelines. Over a period of time, people went into deeper understanding of what requirements could be there, and they came up with various guidelines like the Consort. Consort is one of the most commonly used guidelines because it helps you to define your or present your study, the phase 3 data or your clinical study in a very structured, tabulated manner, like a flow chart. And therefore, it becomes very helpful for somebody who's reading your article to understand how you have done that clinical study. It gives you a very good overview. And similarly, there are several other articles, other guidances, like the STROBE, STROBE, which is for observational studies. How do you write a publication for observational studies? Can we have a systematic way of writing that? And similarly, you have the PRISMA, which is for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. How to look for, how to prepare yourself basically from the start of if you want to if you want to do a systematic review, how do you prepare yourself for a systematic review? And subsequently, how do you do a meta-analysis of the systematic review and finally publish it? So it gives you detailed guidances. And these have been very helpful to the industry for harmonization. The other most important one, which we in the publication department or publication area or function in every pharma are following very, very stringently is called as the GPP, which is a good publication practices. And currently we are in version 3 of the GPP. The GPP 3 came out in 2015, and it outlined 10 principles, and these principles basically talk about how to report trial results. It gave you an introduction to some of the FDA guidelines. a FDA charter basically, which came out in 2007, then an ICMJE, which we just spoke about. I'd also introduced you to the Equator Network. I will come to that in a moment on my next slide. It also talked about what are the ethical guidelines. It kind of summarized all that we discussed before, and it kept adding more depending upon how the industry evolved. It also talked about cross-functional development of a publication plan. Why do we need a publication plan? Why do we need to plan the publication in the very first place? So it gave you those fundamental things over a period of time. Then how do you define contributions? How do you give access to data? And how much of access do you need to give? What about the responsibility? To what extent do the authors take responsibility for the work that is being published or being written? The non-author contributions, how do you give acknowledgement to them? Subsequently, what is the role of the sponsor, meaning a pharma company who's involved in actually getting the clinical trial done? And finally, the declaration of any competing interest. So these were the 10 principles, and you can definitely find these are on the net, and they are available for free for everyone to read. There is absolutely no access or payment required to read these guidelines. And the best way to start would be to go to the Equator Network. Before I move on to the Equator Network, I'm just giving you a heads up that the GPP version 4 is due either the last quarter of this year or the first quarter of the next year. So we would be looking forward to these updated guidelines very soon. Let's move on to the Equator Network. The Equator Network is something which you all should know. The reason being, it has got approximately 432 reporting guidelines for you. It covers different topics. It covers randomized trials, which is Consort, which I just referred to, observational studies, I said to you about, STROBE, systematic reviews, which I spoke to you about, PRISMA, and similarly, you can see some of the most frequently sought are shown on the very first web page. Subsequently, there are 432 of them, and you can really scroll through and go through whatever you need and see how to draft and how to prepare yourself to write a particular publication in that area. Now, you might be wondering, why do we need so much of guidances? Let me give you a quick quick view of how it goes. So let's say, for example, you wanted to know if triglycerides are responsible for causing heart attacks. And you go and try to search literature. You look over 50 years, 60 years, you find tons of literature there. Some say yes, some say no, there may be clinical studies, there may be preclinical studies. There may be just case reports from physicians reporting that. But if they are not written or if the clinical studies have not been done in a uniform manner, if there is no pattern in which they can be brought together and a systematic review written and the meta-analysis done of the data, we cannot evolve a pattern from all these and see whether our previous understanding or that triglycerides may cause a heart attack or the assumption that it may cause heart attacks, whether it does or does not. So if we have this uniform and systematic way of reporting, I think it will really help in due course of time that people can actually sit through the tons of literature and analyze it. And if we are going to do this by AI in future, I think we would be developing this particular trend much quicker than 50 years, because it would be able to gather this data from the various sources and databases all across the world. Okay, I take you to the next reason why the industry does pubs, which we all understood. It's goodwill and transparency. And I am very sure this is not very difficult to imagine why. There is nothing more valuable than relationships. Money is not first, and the industry does understand this very well. The credibility, the reputation, and the perception, apart from transparency and data disclosure, are extremely important to the industry. Of course, as Parijat mentioned in his previous talk, it is a business model. It is not a charity model here. But of course, this credibility and reputation goes a long way for any industry, let alone the pharma industry. And a simple example is every pharma company, or at least that I know of, has some kind of patient support programs. So this helps for any countries, say, which have not which have difficulty in providing access of a particular drug, or there is some financial reason why a particular patient cannot get a particular drug. And then these patient support programs enable you to have this. And this is the way a company builds credibility. In terms of in terms of financial reasons, you might think it in very small sense that, okay, it helps the sales or things like that uh, uh, in the long term, but it also helps the reputation of the company and building credibility for a very, very long time as compared to the lifetime of a human being in that sense. So let's look at the sales aspect. It's obvious, which we already spoke about, that when good clinical results are there and these clinical trial results are appropriately timed, efficiently disseminated, and effectively circulated, or that the publications are effective enough. And what do I really mean by that? We need to know when to release a publication. When do our competitors bring their molecules into the market? When, even if we are not talking about the competitors, we need to know if we are going to present at a congress, and at the same time we are going to do a manuscript. Is there any relationship between the congress and the journal, and do they permit this particular association or the timing of it? This release and timing is extremely important in terms of business, and therefore uh, the transition the translation of a good clinical result into a manuscript or a presentation, and subsequently the reach to the pharma community, is extremely, extremely helpful. And this becomes the backbone of several marketing plans. And it even becomes the backbone of patient access programs, which I just spoke to you about. Um, One must very clearly remember that this does not mean that there is any kind of influence from the marketing team or the commercial team in general towards the development or the content of a publication. What they basically influence is only the timing. They can tell you about when is a good timing. And that is basically a feedback for us to plan the publications. And in no way it is actually taken, their consideration is taken, they participate basically in no way they participate into the content of a publication. To elaborate on that, if a pharma industry collaborates with a vendor or an external agency who supports them in writing a publication, uh, they make sure that they have a separate wall. You can call it as a firewall, or you can call it as a separate server between whatever commercial work that agency or the vendor does for them as against what the same agency does for publications. It's that very well segregated. And without that, they do not enter into kind of an agreement with the particular agency. So that's how important this particular segregation and separation between the commercial and the medical is. If you have paid attention and have gone to big conferences, you would clearly notice that even when you are on the poster floor, and you would notice that when you're in these medical booths, that most of the big congresses, they will have a separate section segregated for the sales or the marketing booths as compared to a medical booth. And this is one of the reasons why they do that, that guidelines do not allow them to mix the two. And there are also guidelines along how much a medical person should talk about something which is relevant to a sales topic, and vice versa. So actually there is training given to medical information people on how much they should be able to communicate and what they should not be able to communicate. So yeah, it goes a long way, and this strategy is extremely, extremely important. Um, so from all that I said so far about why the industry does publications, you would have definitely gathered the point that publication strategy and publication planning, it basically sets the stage for the product to be launched or for your drug molecule, which is under clinical development to be launched. So let's look at a little bit of how does the industry do this. This is a really high level slide to give you very, very top view information of what is a publication strategy and what is a publication plan. I've tried to put this under two different buckets, but it is extremely difficult to make 100% separation between the two, because the publication strategy, it feeds into the publication plan and vice versa. So let's look at how about the publication strategy. It's basically how key communications are optimally communicated to the target audience. And what do you mean by key communications? What are the kind of objectives? So basically, around 3 to 4 years before, when the medical or the clinical development team sits together to plan out or to chart out what should be the future of a possible drug molecule or a possible set of drug molecules. They're definitely in discussion with agencies like the FDA, the regulatory agencies, I mean, like the FDA and the EMA, to decide on how to speak about the molecule, how to communicate, how to put messages about the molecule that they're developing still, and which has just started maybe clinical studies. So the awareness about this compound or about the therapeutic area in which this compound is being launched, the awareness about its mechanism of action in case it is novel, the awareness about how this disease area space has an unmet need, these these particular topics are planned at that stage, and that lays the pipeline or the plan for the entire molecule. So it's like you plan this awareness at a pre-launch stage, you plan it at launch stage, and subsequently at the post-launch phases. And this is sometimes even fed or carried out rather by the epidemiology team. Um, and this scientific rationale, which sets the whole plan, which we call it as a medical plan, it also feeds into what we have subsequently the medical objectives. And then this finally feeds into the publication objectives. So that's how we come to know as to what would be the key criteria or key topics or key objectives for this particular publication. We will always think, oh, it's efficacy, it's safety, it's tolerability. Okay, but what parameters in efficacy are important to present? What parameters matter to the patient? What parameters matter to the physician? If a physician wants to use certain um, clinical parameters of diagnostic parameters, or do they want to use some biochemical parameters to monitor the progress or the regression of a patient? So those key medical objectives are being defined at that very stage. And therefore, I thoroughly enjoy when I see medical objectives getting translated into publication objectives, and how we in reverse, when we do a publication, how that feeds back into the strategy. That's why these overall messaging and the consistent messaging that is also coming under along with discussions with the regulatory agencies is extremely helpful to develop and um, uh, develop an output for the publication, the manuscript. Um, Now we also need to choose who the audiences are going to be. I mean, whom are you going to prepare for? You cannot have all audiences at all times. The latest trend or the latest approach, I wouldn't you want to use the word trend, pardon me. The latest approach is the observation that patients who have participated in a clinical trial, they want to know how did the trial do. So they want to know the study results. Obviously, it would be difficult for all patients to understand the scientific language. So what do? We prepare something called as patient-lay summaries, and this is something which the patients would be in a simpler language, in a simpler English, so that people can understand. And if required, they are sometimes even translated into local languages. This will enable them to understand what their contribution was. They will feel valued for coming back into a trial or telling people that, okay, this company is doing well, they're sincere about it, and they're trying to make a publication, or sorry, trying to make a medicine which is going to be helpful to patients. So this relationship building between patients has become more active over the last few years. And therefore, involving patients or involving patient communities, I would like to let you know that we have now patient communities. There are organizations which have brought patients together, and these patient communities sometimes are in discussion with pharma companies or sponsors, in short, to decide on how future trials could be done. They even are contributing to that extent. So the audience, at what stage you want to involve them in a molecule development, it has become a very critical factor. Finally, the publication plan. Publication plan, in very simple words, are all your tactics, basically an abstract or a poster or an oral presentation or a manuscript or a case report or a review article or a meta-analysis, whatever you are writing. These outputs, when they are put or released into the scientific community world in a serial manner, in a particular sequential manner, and these are what we call as tactics, and these constitute the publication plan. It's not easy, and to decide the timing, we do a series of analysis. We try to find out what does the literature landscape for this particular therapeutic area ask us about. We also try to find out what is the need currently. And based on these, it's decided on when we should chart out our publications. Of course, we definitely take into consideration what the medical objectives were, what was the medical plan when it was previously decided, and therefore, this consistent messaging, this information release is done in a very structured, planned manner. And that is the publication plan. Uh, Giving you an idea of all this, so obviously who does this? It's the medical publications team. We basically do something which I can summarize as maintaining the scientific credibility of a product while maintaining the commercial viability of it. So that is the total summary. And with this, I will take you into little bits and pieces of how and what our day looks like, in the sense what we engage in, and give you a feeling of how mm, different or how complicated our levels of engagement are. Not complicated, how complex our level of engagements are. So let's look at what are the types of publications we do. You have already heard me talking about these types of publications. So you can now see a snapshot of all the different types of publications that we do. Disease landscape, the primary, secondary, and post hoc reviews. This is all known to you. The second four, which I talked about, the primary, secondary, post hoc, and reviews are very well known to you. The additional, the ones that are new, perhaps, are the investigator-initiated studies. It's very obvious from the title that it's initiated by investigators, meaning clinical investigators who are working in hospitals. They have seen your drug work in a study which is planned by the sponsor, and they wanted to do a study of their own. And they decide that based upon their clinical experience. And these investigator-initiated studies are run by them, managed by them, but the drug or the compound of interest is sponsored by the pharma company of whom they reach out to. Registries are groups of or organizations which basically pool together observational data in very simple words to observational data from tons of different patients in a particular area. So you have some European registries, you have American registries, and you can have registries in Australia, in Japan. They can be country-wise, they can be region-wise. But basically, the objective of these registries is to gather information on how a patient is doing. So it's basically patient-level data. It's more real-world data. It's more an understanding of what the patient feels, patient experiences, it's patient perspective of everything. Sometimes some of these registries do gather more information from the hospitals of where the patient might be visiting. So it may be a little different level of complexity. I think I realized that I think I missed out real world evidence in this whole series or gamut of types of publications. So you will have one more to be added to your list. Case reports are simple. You would be familiar with what it means. HER or market access basically evaluates what is the health economics, or what is the possible payer landscape, meaning the insurance companies who actually are involved in reimbursing your expenditure on the medication or the treatment that you're seeking, not necessarily only medication, even the hospitalization. So the market access and the HUR teams, they look into the availability of a particular drug for the patient and what do we need to make it available. So I will come to that in a moment as to how they utilize publications. And epidemiology, I've already mentioned about that they help and support the disease landscape, but in different ways. And finally, it's the patient engagement. Moving on to the next slide, which, okay, by the way, you would have noticed that there are no Congress presentations mentioned here. So beyond this, we always reach out to the Congresses. And the timing of a Congress is also very important in terms of collaborating that or collating that or putting it alongside a manuscript, and how the release of a public or presentation of oral presentation or the poster of a highly important phase 3 molecule is supported by a manuscript which can be published or released on the very same day or the next day after you have done a presentation. Those are some of the fundamentals or the approach that the industry takes. So let's take a look at some of the cross-functional activity that we do. So assuming that medical publications are the center of it all, which is not, but it's a way of telling you how we interact and the different functions that we interact with. And it's very clear from this diagram that this is a constant interaction between all the different functions and medical publications. And how they impact is something which I've tried to depict in the next slide. Basically, the clinical development and medical affairs are the key for a medical publication department, and they provide the input, and the input can also come from allied sources. So every country has apart from the headquarter of a company, every country will have a medical field personnel team, or we can call them medical representatives or MSLs. And these personnel can gather information, come back to the medical team, which is the medical affairs team, and that information feeds into a publication plan. So apart from the clinical data, which is a one-way traffic going out, this is the return channel as to the feedback from our physicians and how they are finding the drug helpful in the clinic, and what is the response of the patient after taking the drug. Um, that's the two-way communication between clinical development, medical affairs, and publications on one side, and the external MSLs or physicians on the outer side. This external physician community and the external experts is represented by the um, three figures on the top left corner of your screen. Moving on, the other groups, it is pretty evident that the HUR or market access, they look into the access, they look into the reimbursement, they look into the benefits from rapid and maintained access. So they look into the cost factors and the access factors of a particular drug in future, and they give us an input as to what kind of publication they might need, when they might need it, so that they can provide supported scientific data which is peer reviewed, published in a journal, to encourage the payers to reimburse the treatment after somebody has used it. So they plan for this, they plan for their meetings, and they use our publications. The epidemiology comes way on, sometimes way ahead, and sometimes even later in the phase of the development, so that they can keep updating on the changes in the landscape, the unmet need of the treatment. And moving on to statistics, I mean, there is no reason not to understand what statistics does here. They would be there at every single publication phase with us. The legal and the IP, the intellectual property team, they definitely help us to draw lines and see that we do not step beyond certain boundaries, which will in turn might affect our own company contributions, and subsequently it might affect the patent life of our drug. Finally, the commercial team, as I said, they do a lot of market research, and the commercial team brings us input about what is the thought process going on and from a commercial standpoint. And when they want to develop product messaging documents or material, they use our scientific data or published articles to develop those product messaging. And with that, I would like to end today's presentation. And thank you so much for your patience, listening very attentively. And let me know if you have any questions. I will stop sharing the slides simply because I cannot see the screen at all.
So participants, do you have any questions or any query to be get it clear? You have any questions or query that you want to be cleared? No, sir. We don't have
All
any
right,
questions. Thank you
no
so much,
problem.
sir, for being
You're
with
most
us.
welcome. And if they have any questions, I'm happy to answer them over email. You have them, please share it with them if they need to.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and have a nice evening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
No problem. Or is working, right? Video, no? So, hello all, the dear participants. We would like, as a committee, me, Dr. Nilesh Mehra, Dr. Jitan Madan, HOD of Department of Pharmaceutics, Dr. Saurabh Srivastava, Associate Dean, and Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh, Department of Pharmaceutics. We would like to thank to all eminent speaker on the first day of, that is the 30th July 2020, the Professor Pastor in Georgia, she want to talk about on this advances in nanomedicine, synthesis or biomimicry. Due to some technical error or the problems, her speech was not continue. So we will we would be trying in the coming weeks so that we can arrange again the session of Professor Pastor in Georgia, so that you can gain a lot of experience from her. We would like to thank to Professor N.K. Jain, Professor Emerite, Department of Pharmaceutical Science, Dr. Hai Singh Gaur University, Sagar. He has delivered a nice lecture onto the toxicological perspective on the nanoparticle and unmet challenge. We would like to thank also Dr. Manish Chaurasia, Principal Scientist, CDRI, Lucknow. He has delivered a nice presentation onto the targeted drug delivery system and well explored about the different approaches that would be we can utilize into the targeted drug delivery system for the further development of the formulation. In the today's session, we started from to the by the Professor Elena Visoto. She has delivered and also explained about the solid lipid nano materials and nanolipid constructs for the drug delivery, including of the in vitro as well as of the in vivo safety challenges. We would like to also thank to Dr. Parijat Jain, Director, Head Strategic Business Relationship Lonja. He has also delivered and give a more informative onto the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics in the different parts, including of a data science into the our pharmaceutical field, so that we definitely we can utilize into the our product development. And so many participants had asked about the some software related questions as well as of some the deep learning imaging technology. So as we all aware about that, nowadays we are utilizing, and even though we are accepting these artificial intelligence based technology, like for example of 3D printing and the image analyzing also, so that we can take off. And at the last speaker, Dr. Siddharth Mukherjee, Senior Publication Manager, Warringer Engine from the Germany. He has delivered a nice talk onto the publication, their ethics, and how we can adopt the publication ethics into the clinical research, as well as for the how the pharmaceutical industry are concerning about these publication, including of the clinical this trial and for the regulation and for regulatory guidelines. So this is a brief about of the workshop, some symposium onto the industrial implication of artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, and nanomedicine R&D innovation. We hope that all the participants have learned about the nanomedicine as well as AI and machine learning and data analytics from the this last two days workshop session. Now, I would like to request to our HOD, Department of Pharmaceutics, Dr. Jiten Madan, who will announce of the today's Best Abstract Award. Please, sir.
Hello, dear all. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Now, this is the time to announce the Best Abstract Award. We have received a number of abstracts on AI, machine learning, and nanomedicine based topics. Based on the evaluation criteria, the Best Abstract Award goes to Miss Tanya Rally, who is the student of Dr. Kanchan Kohli from Department of Pharmaceutics, Faculty of Pharmacy, Jamia Hamdard University, New Delhi, on the topic role of machine learning in the advent of gut microbiota as novel therapeutic target. Thank you very much. An email will be sent to the winner, and the certificate will be goes to the email.